Undercover Burns is the first episode of the 32nd season of The Simpsons, directed by Bob Anderson, and it's one of those episodes that I think is not too bad. It's quite thought-provoking, and Mr. Burns decides to disguise himself as an employee called Fred to try and get some secrets from his employees about what people think of him. And there's a very funny scene where he's in the men's bathroom and he's reading the graffiti on the stalls, and he refers to something. In fact, I'll keep that for a spoiler warning because it's the funniest thing in the whole thing, and I don't want to spoil the joke at the moment. But the point is, it got off to a really strong start, and then he becomes Fred, and he starts to realize that his employees, namely Homer, Lenny, and Carl, are good guys who are welcoming him into the fold and want to be friends with him, and they invite him to Moe's, and it's a friendship that Mr. Burns doesn't really have, and he begins to take to it, and part of him wants to always be Fred, and it's unclear what's going to happen. And I rather enjoyed it. I thought it was very moving and really fascinating. The design of Fred is pretty awesome. And it's not just him in a disguise, there's kind of technology involved and his voice has changed, and it's pretty impressive and it's pretty well done, and I rather liked it. Smithers doesn't like it, and obviously Lenny, Homer and Carl have got no idea what's going on. And as I said, it's unclear where it's going, and I found that unpredictability to be really pleasing. I didn't love the direction it took. I don't love something specific, and I guess I'll discuss that now in a moment with a spoiler warning. I'll sum up very briefly. First of all, it's an interesting narrative. It's well developed. Visually, it's very engaging. This whole camaraderie between the employees, I thought, was brilliant and really well done. And it got off to a strong start. It continued to be really strong, dipped a little bit towards the end, but ultimately a good episode. So a few spoilers from now. So the joke that I was talking about is when he referred, because it took a second for the penny to drop, and it's where he said, I didn't write it down exactly, but he's referring to the cucumber that's crying. It just took a second for me to work out what on earth he was going on about, and from now on, that's all I'll ever think of when I see graffiti of that nature. The bit that I didn't like, but also it gave me one of my favourite bits, is when Fred kind of became a person on his own. When Burns stepped out of the suit and Fred wouldn't die. And I didn't like that. I just didn't think that was the right direction to take it. But I did love the fact that Fred said he won't die because he's the last spark of goodness in Mr. Burns. And that's what this represents. It helps to show that there is a tiny bit of goodness in Burns. We don't see it often. We do every now and then. But it helped to show that actually, given the right situation and given the right triggers, in this case, those were, positive vibes from his new friends, he might be able to show that goodness. And I rather like that. So I'm kind of in two minds with how I feel about that ending. But the bit with releasing the hounds in the trapdoor, I just loved, because it took them 31 seasons to realise they could also do that. I enjoyed it. It's a really good episode. It's a pretty solid start to season 32, and I'm really keen to see what else this season has in store. But for now, Undercover Burns, although it's not perfect, is a pretty brilliant episode.